Is climate change a hoax? If so, what is the evidence? Quote, "It's not the climate change that's the hoax. It's the purported cause, CO2, of climate change that's the hoax. It's the misrepresentation of climate change, skeptics' position about climate change that's the hoax. It's all the ad hominem attacks on skeptics that form part of the hoax. I do not think that using ad hominem attacks have any place in debating issues. It is also dishonest. Terms like denier are not helping the debate and just fuels division. It's a term that belongs in religion, not scientific debate. I'm not denying any science if I disagree about interpretation of facts. It is very dishonest to call someone a denier pretending they deny science while it's the interpretation that the disagreement is about. I don't deny that climate changes or that it's been warming since the end of the Little Ice Age. I don't think anybody denies that. It is dishonest to misrepresent facts like that. We don't disagree that it's warming or that climate changes. We disagree about the cause. It is not CO2. Climate change is a natural process. Global warming is all natural. The case for the greenhouse effect is so weak that alarmists are forced to take a hostile, aggressive and dishonest approach using many of the logical fallacies, particularly the straw man fallacy. The skeptic position gets misrepresented as denial of the fact that climate is changing or global warming is happening. That is not true. We disagree about causes, not about the fact that climate changes or global warming happens. Many skeptics also believe that global warming is a good thing, not a crisis or catastrophe. The facts are, convective processes are much more important in atmosphere than radiative processes. Air isn't great at radiation, whether absorption or emission. With the exception of thermosphere blocking dangerous high-energy ionizing radiation like X-rays and ozone in stratosphere absorbing UV atmosphere is transparent to most of insolation. Troposphere in particular gets almost all its heat from Earth's surface by conduction, convection, evaporation of H2O and infrared radiation from Earth's surface. All of those heat transfer mechanisms cool Earth's surface as much as it warms the bottom of atmosphere. When air heats up it expands and undergoes convection. Convection removes heat from Earth's surface. Convection does work against gravity. Expansion does work against the environment. Doing work requires energy. That energy has to come from somewhere. It comes from the heat, molecular kinetic energy, of the rising hot air, which therefore has to cool as it rises. This contributes to the lapse rate, atmospheric temperature gradient. This tends to cool atmosphere the higher you go. This, plus the fact that atmosphere is warmed from its bottom up by being in contact with Earth's surface causes atmosphere to keep its heat at the bottom. The only way the bottom of atmosphere could get any warmer is if Earth's surface got warmer first. This is what has been happening since the end of the Little Ice Age. Earth's surface got hotter due to natural processes causing the bottom of atmosphere to get hotter. It can't be atmosphere making Earth's surface any hotter than the sun already made it. No tropospheric hot spot has been found. When atmosphere warms, it expands. The result is a bigger atmosphere rather than a hotter atmosphere, i.e. delta V instead of delta T, because delta V involves doing work. Earth's surface temperatures are very sensitive to changes in the sun's outflow because it's so high energy. Where I grew up, Namibia, the sun is so hot in summertime that it bakes you right out of your bed the moment it rises. When you're outside and a cloud moves in front of the sun you can feel the temperature dropping. When the sun reappears from behind the cloud you immediately feels the heat increase. Inside the house with its galvanized metal roof plates you hear the creaking of the plates as they expand and shrink with the rapid temperature changes. The system is highly sensitive and responsive to insolation. That solar heat has very high energy, short wavelength, infrared. The heat is so high that it can actually be difficult to tan your skin. Tanning is dependent on UV. The heat from solar infrared is so unbearable in the hot sun that you get thermal injury before you get enough UV exposure. When we look at a solar eclipse we have to protect our eyes from high-energy solar infrared leaking past the moon. When we look down to Earth our eyes don't need such protection. That's because the infrared from Earth is too low energy to cause damage. The infrared wavelengths from Earth's surface fall in the range 6 to 22 microns. CO2 doesn't absorb the full spectrum of that, only around 15 microns. That is really low Planck energy, E equals hf. It corresponds with an emission temperature of around -80 C. That's about the temperature of dry ice. Do you think radiation from dry ice will melt wet ice? Have you tried that experiment? We are talking very basic textbook physics here. Wien's displacement law, Wikipedia. The other two wavelengths captured by CO2 are 7 microns and 4.3 microns, corresponding to emission temperatures of respectively 1070 K, 675 K. These kind of temperatures are not found on Earth's surface except open volcanoes. They therefore do not form part of the spectrum of infrared from Earth's surface, trapped by CO2. They form part of the spectrum of radiation only coming from the sun that CO2 protects, shielding Earth's surface from, like thermosphere protects us from dangerous ionizing radiation like X-rays, and ozone in stratosphere protects us from UV. That which doesn't reach the surface because of shielding can't warm the surface. The kind of radiation from Earth's surface captured by CO2 is too low energy to raise any temperatures above -80 C. The shielding effects of CO2 vastly outweigh its trapping effects. More CO2 will increase the shielding without increasing the trapping because the radiation from Earth's surface that gets trapped is limited while from the sun much less limited. That's because the number of microstates radiating in the sun so vastly outnumber the same on Earth. Both the intensity, flux, and Planck energy from the sun dwarfs that from Earth into oblivion. The radiation from Earth's surface gets captured to extinction within a few meters up in atmosphere. If you double CO2, the distance over which it's captured will simply half. The capturing doesn't increase with rising CO2. The shielding does. Shielding is CO2 dependent. Trapping isn't. On the balance, CO2 is a coolant. The infrared from Earth's surface, trapped by CO2, is distributed around 15 microns. That corresponds to emission temperatures around -80 C. That won't raise surface temperatures anywhere on Earth's surface except now and then on a few places in Antarctica that occasionally gets colder than that. Here is another aspect of the hoax. When you try to go off-grid by using your own alternative, renewable power sources, you get punished.